So there's this clip from a New Year's Eve party at Mar-a-Lago that's been getting a ton of attention. It shows Donald Trump making some pretty explosive claims about fraud. But, this is about more than just one off-the-cuff comment. It's really a window into a much broader ideological argument. So today, we're going to deconstruct what's being said in that source material piece by piece.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll set the scene, where these comments actually came from. Then we'll dive right into that core allegation. After that, we'll look at the response that's being proposed. And finally, we're going to connect all those dots to the wider ideology being presented.
So let's start at the very beginning, the rant itself.
Okay, so picture this. It's a pretty glamorous New Year's Eve party at Mar-a-Lago. The source video shows Donald Trump. He's surrounded by his family. You can see Melania and Barron, as well as a bunch of members of his administration.
Now, the source material points out this really interesting contrast. First, Trump is asked about his New Year's resolution, and his answer is peace on earth. But that vibe, well, it doesn't last long.
And boom, here's the pivot. Right after that wish for peace, the whole tone just shifts on a dime. Trump launches into this allegation of massive fraud, and suddenly that becomes the new focus of the entire clip.
Okay, so what exactly is in this allegation? Let's break down the numbers and the places that get mentioned.
At the absolute heart of the allegation is this just huge number, $18 billion. It's a staggering figure. Trump claims this is the amount of fraud committed, and he initially directs that claim at the Somali community in Minnesota.
But, and this is a really crucial point from the source, it doesn't just stop in Minnesota. The clip shows Trump immediately expanding on the allegation, claiming that other places, like California, Illinois, and New York, are actually worse.
So when you make an allegation that big, what's the proposed solution? Let's take a look at what the source material lays out.
The source describes this really sweeping federal response that it says has been activated. We're talking a multi-agency probe. You've got everyone from Health and Human Services to the Department of Labor, the FBI, the DOJ, and even the Small Business Administration supposedly getting involved.
And this slide really gets to the stated goals of all this. According to the source, what supporters are calling for is mass deportations and denaturalization. And Trump himself is quoted talking about getting all that money back.
Okay, now the source material pivots again. We're moving beyond that specific fraud claim to a much bigger ideological argument. And this is presented primarily through a clip of former senior advisor Stephen Miller.
Right here, the source brings in Stephen Miller to frame the entire issue. The argument presented is that this isn't just about some isolated incidents of fraud. No, this is supposedly the result of a decades-long policy choice that he calls the single largest experiment on a society.
So what is this experiment he's talking about? Well, at the core of his argument is the year 1965 and a major shift in immigration policy. He paints his picture of a pre-1965 America with tightly restricted immigration, which he claims was totally upended, creating a global ability for people to come to the U.S.
From there, the source draws a direct line from that post-1965 policy to a whole host of modern problems. The argument presented by Miller is that without that change, things like test scores, healthcare, and crime rates would look completely different today.
This quote, wow, it really sums up the whole thesis being presented in the source video. Miller's argument is essentially this. If you bring in people from what he calls failing societies and give them unlimited free welfare, you're just going to replicate the very conditions that they left behind.
So what starts as a rant at a New Year's Eve party ends up broadening into this fundamental debate about national identity and policy. The source material doesn't just leave us with a claim about fraud. It forces us to confront a much bigger question. How do the policy choices we make shape the nation we become, and what does that mean for our future?